I'm a small mid-sized business consultant. Okay, I'm going to take the conversations that these gentlemen, however, very smart gentlemen who are looking at very detailed oriented things, I'm going to kind of move us up about 10,000 feet. I help companies define and execute growth strategies. Going global or globally expanding is one of those kind of strategies to pursue. As you've heard from these gentlemen, there are some complexities to those strategies that you must know about and guard against to protect your company. I work for companies both domestically who are looking to go abroad. I also work for companies who are foreign companies who have come here to America and try to be successful in globally expanding into America. Now, one of my past, and if you see my bio, you'll see that I've had a very interesting and varied career, but one of my past, I served as an accident investigator for the military. As you know, the military pays particular attention to when accidents occur with their military jets, and they do it for two basic reasons. One is to make sure they understand if there's any structural or system flaw in the aircraft that needs to be addressed. But the vast majority of the cases, these accidents are pilot error, and they want to understand the decision processes that took place that led to that error or that accident, and then to share those lessons with the rest of the aircrew community and the pilot community so those accidents aren't ever repeated in the same way. And I've decided to take this approach with this audience today in this presentation and to share lessons from those companies, in this case foreign companies who've come here to America to pursue global expansion. And it didn't quite go as well as they would have liked. And I'm going to hope that you take these lessons and apply them as you're thinking your strategy and in your approach to global expansion, and you don't repeat them. When I typically start an engagement with a client, I will spend time and I will listen to them lament and tell the tale of their struggles and trials and tribulations for, what they're struggling with and why things aren't going as well as they would have expected. And then I'll let a moment when they're done to let them catch their breath, and then I'll ask a simple question, and that is, why did you choose to go global? And you'd be surprised to see how few of these companies could articulate that answer. Most of the time, they simply said, well, it was time. That they succeeded sufficiently in their own country, and they thought now it was time to take on America. In some cases, rarely, they came on the heels of their biggest customer, who was also a foreign company, who also felt it was time to come to America, and they wanted to bring their suppliers with them. I then would ask some more probing questions, baffled by that first response, and saying, well, how well did you understand your relative strengths, the weaknesses and the opportunities and threats associated with this marketplace that you're choosing to enter? Well, you start seeing the eyes start getting kind of wider and that kind of glazed over look. I call it the deer in the headlights look. And that was disturbing. I would probe even more by asking them the question of, did you understand, what were the top 3 barriers to entry that you identified, and what plan did you have in place to overcome them? Who were your target customers, and what competition did you expect to face when you came here? And what was your plan, and how did you intend to compel buyers to buy from you versus the competition? I would ask further, how well did they understand the decision-making process associated with this particular customers? How well did you understand the cultural climate in which the business is conducted for your particular industry? And finally, I would ask how expanding abroad fit into their overall corporate strategic plan. Now, by this point in time, it's silence. You can hear crickets. And I want to share with you probably the most important lesson that I could give you. And oh, by the way, I lost this screen. Okay. No, it's gone. Okay, it's back. The most important lesson I can give you, and the one that if there of the 5 lessons here that you want to remember, and that is going global, whether it's exporting or expanding abroad, must be part of an overall strategic plan and not and please forgive me for my bluntness, simply done on a whim or because, quote unquote, it was time. And by what I mean by a strategic plan, I'm talking about a well-vetted, well-process-oriented plan that looks at strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, understands the competition you're going to face, the barriers, the issues that these gentlemen talked about and addressed, foreign corrupt practices, the legal aspects of your product, protecting your product or service. I said, this will serve you well and will change the likelihood of success in a significant way. Lesson number 2. Think carefully about who you send to launch your business venture and give them the support they need to be successful. Now, this sounds kind of obvious, but guess what? And here's the pattern that I witnessed over and over again. Typically, the person that's sitting across the desk telling me this story of their woes, this foreign company who's trying to be successful. Let me tell you the profile of that person. That person is typically a foreign national from the country with which the company came from. That person typically was their best salesperson and was sent to America with great fanfare and confetti and put on a boat and, good luck, make success for us. And he'd been here now by this point for about a year or so, and he's no closer to closing on that first deal than he was when he started. And that person typically is starting to feel the heat from the home office, particularly the owner who's been outlaying the cash to support this guy abroad, but not seeing any business in return. This poor guy has discovered that rather than calling on customers and doing what it is he knows best, and that's selling, because he was the best salesperson from Germany or Israel or whatever, that his year has been miraculously eaten away by matters such as the legal identity of the company, the office location, housing decisions, banking and credit challenges, staffing, pay, insurance, computer network, signage, leases, office furniture, visa issues, sales channels. All of these issues that are relevant and important, but none of which he was trained to do. What's worse is that the implications of these decisions and how they're made and what they make could have long-lasting and costly implications, as you've learned from these gentlemen earlier. And oh, by the way, when he calls home to look for that help he needs, no one's answering the phone because, well, the business day is over in Germany or in Australia or in Japan. And now he has to struggle to find that person that might help him get those answers that he needs, so he tries to interrupt them at home. And instead, he gets received by a frustrated person who's upset because he's interrupting dinner or interrupting the ball game or the soccer match. So identifying who to send, equipping them with the right resources and the support to make some of the tough decisions that need to be made is a very important lesson here. Lesson number 3, decide early if you're going to be an international company or simply one who does business abroad, and there is a difference. UPS, our host here, as well as another big company in Atlanta, Coca-Cola, both recognize that assimilating into the culture and climate of each of the countries where they do business was a strategy for success. If you walk into any one of the 60 UPS offices abroad, you will be hard-pressed to identify it as an American company other than recognizing that the brand is American. They abide by the customs, they celebrate the holidays, they employ the people, and I'm not talking about just the people to answer the phones and be secretaries. I'm talking about people who run the local business. Sadly, though, most companies choose instead the latter approach, and that's simply doing business abroad. And I tell you that we Americans do not hold a monopoly on this kind of arrogance, that we know better. As I witnessed numerous foreign companies who have approached our market in the same way, insisting to be known and advertised as a Japanese company or a German company or an Israeli company, when it brings no unique competitive advantage to their product or service. Now, you can get away with this kind of approach if you dominate your market and you're the only, guy on the block. And I look at companies like Microsoft and Boeing. They don't really have to assimilate. Where else are you going to go for the world's best fighters or the world's best airplane? But if you're not in that category, I would think very, very hard about what your market entry strategy is going to be and take lesson from companies like UPS and Coca-Cola. And my recommendation is try to be a company that is international. Next lesson. Don't export more than you must. It's important to remember that what you're exporting is most likely a product or a service, and if it's a service, it's a process behind the service. You're not exporting your people, you're not exporting your brochures, you're not exporting your presentations, all right? So, and you'll see by this example, and this is a real example of a company, and the gentleman told me, so Mike, this is what I got from the home office. The Englishized brochure. A brochure that is not appropriate here in America, but this is what they sent him. And I'd say that sometimes Englishizing just doesn't cut it in the new market that you're trying to enter. As I said on the previous chart, that there's little room for national pride in the global marketplace, unless and only if the nation of origin brings a competitive advantage as viewed from the eyes of your customers. You hear things like German engineering or the precision of a Swiss watch are two examples I can think of where the country of origin adds actually value. And that knowing that the company comes from Germany or Swiss, can be comforting. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the people that run that company here in America necessarily need to be Swiss or German. We have all watched in agony sometimes where a company who has just landed, say, in Atlanta and has an opportunity to introduce themselves in a forum with a bunch of American businessmen who could be their future clients or partners or customers. But you can't understand because of the strong accents. And you listen to the message, and the message is not coherent or clear or gives them a discriminating competitive edge. And you just scratch your head and wonder, was this strategy well thought out? It takes me to the final lesson, and that is establish firm ground rules for cash expenditures. The one common reason companies give up their venture into the United States and return home is they ran out of cash, or better worded, they exceed the threshold that they wanted to spend. Typically, that I hear over and over again that the cash went faster than they ever expected. This doesn't surprise me sometimes as I look around at some of the office settings that they've chosen and the furniture that they've chosen to acquire, in the house that they've chosen to live in, the car they chose to drive, and I just have to wonder whether or not these decisions that were made to address the ego or the pride of the nation that sent him here or the individual who made those decisions. I strongly urge companies who plan to pursue global expansion to establish some means to judiciously control cash expenditure. The method I advise is to break those cash expenditures into 3 different categories. That is value added, non-value added but necessary, and non-value added. A brief definition on the value added is that the costs directly contribute to the building of the product or the execution of the service. If your customer saw it as a line item on an itemized receipt, he'd be willing to pay for it because he recognizes that's a legitimate cost for the product. A non-value added but necessary is the expenses that are necessary to do business licenses, phone, internet, those things fit into that category. And finally, the third category is just simply non-value added. These are expenditures which consume resources but create no value in the eyes of the customer, such as office furniture and things like that. The goal is to keep the non-value added to value added ratio somewhere less than 10-to-1. These are the lessons that I thought was worthwhile sharing that I have seen, whether the company comes from Israel or Germany or France or Japan. These are common lessons and mistakes that have been made by these foreign companies who've come to America to pursue their growth expectations through global expansion. Going global is a very good growth strategy. But as you learn from these gentlemen, there are lots of risks involved and that need to be taken into account when you lay out your strategy. So in summary, make sure that when you go global as part of an overall corporate strategic plan, and that has been well vetted, that you send the right people and you support them fully, that you make the decision early about whether or not you want to be an international company or one who simply does business abroad, and that you don't export more than you must and recognize that you are not exporting your people, and have firm ground rules for how you manage cash expenditures because it goes fast. Now, using the analogy that I had at the start about accident investigations, the The accident has occurred, the investigation has been completed, and the lessons have been shared with you in the audience. You have to decide whether or not you're going to make the same mistakes again. Thank you very much.